Welcome to Still Uncaptured with me, Kgomotso Moalusi.
And myself, Undumiso Wakangcobo Iqadi. Lasemaqadini kwamnamatha naseHammersdale. You sound so bored. And I'm talking about such big things.
Yes, and every week I get to hear about these big things. That's the only reason I'm bored. But today we're going to be talking about autism. What is it? What does it look like? Why does it, when I grew up, I certainly didn't know a single person. It wasn't something that was diagnosed. It wasn't something that was talked about. Do you know any autistic people?
I do not know. I have a suspicion that, like me, the first time you were introduced to even the concept of autism, Dustin Hoffman.
Rain Man.
Ironically, that is so hilarious.
1989.
When the lady at my son's crash said to me, I think your son has autistic. I was like, he's not even speaking. Where is that? I'm a Tom Cruise fan. I'm like, what are you talking about?
But introducing her, Kgomotso Moalusi, who's an activist within the sphere of autism. And you have a child who's also got autism, Kgomotso.
I have twin boys. And they both have autism. Old. They both have autism. Their diagnoses are 5 years apart because autism by its very nature does not present the same. So your question was, did you know? Chances are you've known autistics, but you didn't know that's what it was.
Right.
So if I had to put Letabo and Lesedi in front of you, they present incredibly different. I mean, they present as handsome, but that's because they're my kids.
I like that.
But, autism presents because it's a neurological condition that speaks to communication from the brain to the rest of the body. And communication, you guys in media, so communication would be speaking and using your hands and your movement. But I learned through this journey, just went back to basics, that actually we communicate through our senses. So in the sense of autism, it would be the usual how your body processes information through your senses, which would be seeing, touching, eating, smelling, hearing. But then there's the additional three, which would be vestibular. Vestibular would be your spatial movement type of thing. It would be proprioceptive, which is your body awareness. The sense of me. Proprioceptive.
Proprio.
Yes,
okay, proprioceptive.
So where I am in the couch versus where the table is.
Yes.
That type of movement. Or even where is my hand as opposed to how my body moves. So you would have seen it. I loved it when you were talking about your son earlier. You would have seen maybe Ngwana asaduling handle on the couch, always slouched or moving around. And that's actually a proprioceptive type of thing, or even vestibular, because it's also a balance thing. And then the last sense would be interoception, which would be the signals inside your body. It's time to eat. It's time to drink. It's time to sleep. It's time to go to the bathroom. Hence, on our journey, we then find sometimes something like potty training happens a lot later on because that stimuli is not there. So what happens in our life is you need to keep things very routine and very predictable in certain things. So listen,
twins who are 12 years old. But now tell me about the diagnosis. How come they were
apart?
5 years apart.
Yes. Okay. So a lot of the diagnosis around autism would normally come from a pediatrician, a neurologist, a pediatric psychiatrist, etc., because they meet children at that time in their lives at 18 months above, where they're supposed to be gaining social interaction. And autism, because you do not see it physically, you see it in the behavior. Right. So you see in how somebody communicates, how they socialize, how sometimes they move, but that's not always a given. But so for me, like I said, then the teacher would say to me, listen, the way your child is acting, something is up. We would have seen it where at about 18 months where your child is supposed to be perhaps mimicking what you're doing, maybe looking at you in the eyes, maybe hugging, and they're not keen for that. I had twins, so we didn't have visitors for a long time. Hell, we were just tired people. Then when you started bringing people in, you would have one child who seems to be having tantrums and Kgomotso what is going? And as a first-time parent, everybody
We're
is the
busy
professor.
figuring this out. You do not know what you're
And
doing.
then throwing your twang,
Yeah.
and now see how life is going. So it was at that point. And initially we thought, okay, the twins went to school and then they were separated. Maybe that's what it is. But actually, I remember the first time I saw my kids at an end of year function. And there was Letabo with his class up on the stage. And I could see, because initially you think your child is getting irritating. This is a tantrum. But actually it's not a tantrum. It's a meltdown where they're overstimulated and they literally want to get away. My child was on the stage not wanting to be part of the choir, overwhelmed by the lights, by the sound. You actually see that, no, this person is in distress. Because a tantrum is, I want this water, I give you the water, you calm down. Whereas a
tantrum.
A meltdown.
Oh, meltdown, yeah.
A meltdown is is being overstimulated. Now, here's the kicker. No two autistic people are the same, right? They don't present the same. And autism is also not linear. So you're not very autistic and not so autistic. There are those elements that will come. Maybe it will present in how you communicate or lack of communication, in repetitive behavior, transitioning. In our place, you will find pictures all the time because we must say at this time we're doing this, then we're moving to that. So back to the senses. You can be hyper, you can be hyper. So you can have an autistic person who finds these lights too bright. Yeah. And another who loves the lights. So switch them on and let's do the disco lights. Then at the same time, although you got those 8 senses, there's one where they're sensory seeking, which means they like a lot of it, or they're sensory avoidant. So that's why no two autistic kids are necessarily the same, or individuals.
So what was the difference that you saw with your
in the 5 years?
With me, the one that always is the difference for us, apart from the behavior that looks like a child doesn't want to be anywhere, the one that really gets to parents a lot is the speaking. So initially you go back to your pediatrician because my child is getting to 2 years, they get into 3 years, they're not speaking. What is going on? Yeah. Right. And for me, that was it. And it was, no man, they're slow and they're premature and they're twins. Let's give it some time. They will catch up. But you feel it in the pit of your soul that something else is going on. Looking back, I now realize my child struggled with eating. Even when we started having food, because sometimes some of our children have rejection of certain foods. So, there's some autistics who can go their whole lives and only eat certain types of food at certain levels of textures, because those 8 senses are always in play with each other, and it can be hyper or hyper. Now, Letabo, so he was, I think, the easiest because he really was struggling with speaking. He was doing some of the more obvious things where he's walking on his tippy toes, he's covering his ears, maybe he likes to rock, maybe he likes to spin, etc. And with Lesedi, we couldn't decide, is he doing it because he's copying? Because on top of my Discovery Channel, I live with twins. So Al-Qaeda leads and I'm just the person who makes sure things are done, and it's been part of the best part of this journey where, you're always outside. I'm on the outside and I'm, so there's that communication. So with Letabo, he got his diagnosis at about 3. Yeah. And because there was no sleeping, there was a problem with the eating, there were the obvious tantrums, etc. Whereas Lesedi, we thought it was just a matter of speech delay.
Yeah.
Right. And so what then happened, Letabo's path was clear. We were going to go the special education space. Lesedi, we're going to do mainstream. But when he was in mainstream, I also realized that actually it's not working out. The talking was coming slower than ever, but he still has some OCD-like tendencies, repetitiveness, some social anxieties. And twins are hilarious because Lesedi may be the child who speaks up until now. Letabo still doesn't speak. But Lesedi is very emotionally dependent on his twin for guidance. I think one of the best things about autism is you don't say autistic lives in their own life, but Letabo could not be bothered. He could not be bothered. Listen to me, so you're looking at me funny. That is your problem. Said we'd be like, what is wrong with that lady's face? She must fix her face, mommy. Why is she acting like that? Whereas Letabo is just like, go. Like Tamelakwa.
So you're talking about this, all right? So now I've got a friend who's living with autism, right? Diagnosed very late, like as in his very late 40s, completely accidentally. He was doing some other check and someone said, no, man, this guy might be on the spectrum. Well, I want to talk about the spectrum at some point, right? Or the other. But the thing about it is that you are talking about retrospectively looking and thinking, oh, flip, that was a sign. Because as soon as I heard that this friend is autistic, so much started making sense. I was like, oh, okay. Because I remember one of the first trips him and I went on, and we had said we're leaving at 7, and he comes and he parks his car like literally at 16:58, but he sits in the car, right? Until it's like exactly 7 o'clock, and he walks up to my door and he knocks at exactly like
kind of like robotic,
like almost.
Yeah.
And his life was just so regimented, right? And the question that it's also tied within the fact that if I have a child and I'm looking for signs, what are the things to look for? Because now I have like a lastborn, right? Where sometimes I look at him and I'm go, is this child not maybe possibly, maybe not on the, because he's also extremely regimented, as in you cannot be late more than sort of 3 minutes without him really getting anxious about the fact that you're late. But Baba, you're late. You said you'd be here at 7:30, 7:34, So what do you do as a parent? What do you look for?
I think one of the difficult things, especially in this time, is remember now we're raising kids and we're raising kids with gadgets, which means their social skills are also a bit off. Yeah. So I think one of the first things I always say to people, well, it's also true. You do not go to a doctor once and they say that is autism. Yeah. Chances are you need to look at behavior. And that's why I was bringing in the plight of teachers and ECD who, to meds, those people are lay people. But they're the ones who know behavior because they are with the child for a couple of hours and they see that, man, some of this behavior, like you'll find a child who doesn't necessarily play with the rest of the crowd, but he plays alongside. It's called parallel play. I'm with you, but I'm not with you. Or a child who you buy a doll or a car and all they play with is the wheel and not the rest of it. Or an attachment to things. Like, my son would always like to have a rock or something. When they're smaller, pain threshold. Letabo had a broken arm and did not cry. It was me, mother, who's saying, but this child is walking a bit lopsided. And the bone was broken. He was just, you felt like some fever and you saw, but there's that. Or my other favorite one, well, favorite now that I've passed it, there is the no fear. This person can climb up things, especially in those former years where the kid is young. You feel and look like a chaotic parent. If the child is not taking clothes off, they are screaming in the middle of nowhere. Listen, this has been my body more or less all of my life. But Bonagashiana, my brother, like these are my cubs. I need to hold them together. And twins are also twisted. They never go in the same direction. Yeah. You're like constantly looking chaotic. But I want to go back to your point about your friend.
No, hold that thought, Kgomotso. We're in conversation with Kgomotso Moalusi, who is an autism activist as a mother to sons, right?
Twins.
They're boys.
Twin boys.
Twin boys who are both autistic when we come back. Welcome back to Still Uncaptured. We're talking all things autism. You were talking, Kgomotso, about you've got these 2 kids now. They're both under your tutelage and you have to kind of figure out what's going on. And do they have a special bond as twins? Because twins are supposed to have this, a bond that no other siblings sort of have. Do your twins, autistic as they are, have that special twins bond?
Because this one just dispels the myth. There's always this myth that autistic people cannot have relationships. And they do. I think if you understand that autism in essence is thinking differently, right? And because you think differently, your behavior will be different. And listen, There was a time in the earlier years where things were a bit tricky. But I think once one, as a caregiver and such, you get armed with knowledge, and most importantly, adjust. You see, if you understand that autism is a lifelong condition, it is not curable. All the therapies, all the medications that you can do, they're all there to help you maintain a little bit, deal a bit with the anxiety, deal with
manage.
It's to manage.
It's
there
like
is
diabetes.
Nothing to cure. There is no doctor that's like, listen, I can zonk this out of your child.
Right.
It doesn't happen. So, and even there, I mean, I was saying earlier to somebody, my parents always laugh because in my formative years, why is it when you're carefree? Even school, you go, you drop out, you come back. But God was like, full time. Like, I know things that I never thought would come in. Like, even when it comes to medication, one of the things people don't do, they just go to spaces and you take medication and this what. But you have a duty to go back to say, hi, Dr. Kgomotso, from the time you gave me this medication, this is what I'm seeing in the child. Yeah. Because, the going to the doctor thing, where it frustrates me is you are taught everything about this condition is about routine and predictability. Then I must go see my specialist twice a year. I must take my child out of their usual routine, go to a waiting room. By the time you see my child, they are dysregulated. And you're like, of course, we knew. They're not really amounting to anything. They look whatever, let's do. Whereas if you come with a file and you say, listen, we're sleeping better, we're eating better, this is what we're doing, then you can get to a balance. So I always say to parents, if you get medication that has your child drooly and zonked out, it is too much. Yeah. Something is being done a lot. I mean, one of the main ones is an anti-anxiety. And I remember one time we got a wrong dosage and Letabo would eat. He would eat to the point of where he couldn't stop. But luckily I had the support of parents who were like, no, go back to the doctor. We got to tell him something here is not working. And I think also, parenting is so personal. I think one of the things I've learned on this journey is you cannot be super judgy. I mean, you are in this covenant with God from the way we name our children to everything. And then all that is taken away and you look at him like, Joe, no bitrea. So in the middle of nowhere, I have a child I don't understand. My child doesn't understand why I don't understand them. Society is like, what is going on? So it is, oh Lord, the word I nearly used was just wrong, but it is a total mind to do like
a mind fuck. You wanted to say mind fuck. All right, we can say that. This is still uncut.
Okay.
No, it doesn't make for a lesser parent. It's just what it is.
It's what it is. So I'm fascinated by your response to Kgomotso's question, because you used words that for me, having not gone through, but like witnessed a situation of someone who's autistic that I have known for just going on 25 years, right? So a quarter of a century, with my friend that I was saying that I had always known, this guy, there's something. Like
they're weird.
He's weird.
You can't put your finger on it.
So everything for him is just way too much routine, right? And so on. So you are a parent, and so it's a two-pronged question, which is you are a parent living with children that are autistic, which I can only imagine that well into their adulthood, even if they find mates, they are still going to have to be people that you watch for the rest of your life. That relationship, because you use the word, you need to adjust. So the question is, autism, and you already have partially answered it. It is actually a biological, physiological condition that is untreatable. And therefore, when you are dealing with that person, because I realized in retrospect that I always have had to adjust around him.
It is uncurable.
Incurable. Mm-hmm. And so when someone is in a relationship, a romantic relationship with someone who is autistic, what are the do's and the don'ts? Because this is what I imagine you'll have to deal with for the rest of your life.
But also what you're referring to, sorry to interrupt you there, is that the spectrum is what I'm kind of curious about.
Yes.
Because obviously you've got twins who are completely different. Their mannerisms, their behavior, the way they react to everything is quite different. So the spectrum is quite wide from kids who can communicate, to an adult who can communicate,
to your
what
savants,
to the savants, like the Rain Man type of scenario. And because I was thinking about independence, are you gonna have to take care of your twins for the rest of your life?
Now you're talking to something that has me like. It has me very emotional. It's a thought I never really want to go into, but I have no choice because they're getting older. I mean, in a space like South Africa, our children, now things have improved in the past couple of years where you can get entry into school, perhaps maybe by 7. But by most times, our kids get access to school between 8 and 9, which means you've already missed like 4 years of schooling. I mean, be it swimming lessons, being restaurant, but I want to go to your adjust. Adjust doesn't mean quitting. I know the idea is if you've got special needs people to take care of, so people act the fool. And I don't have energy. I don't have energy to have to explain to you, this person is not doing this on purpose. Bona, we have the t-shirts. I walk into a place. I explain to you what is going on. And you still I'll give you an example. One of the things, so we work a lot with visual communication to say, okay, we're going to go to the restaurant. We're going to eat. We're not at this restaurant. We're eating this. Now, before, when I didn't know, before you would walk in and Letawa had an obsession with ice cubes and he would be grabbing ice cubes wherever they are in the restaurant. Now, you can imagine you're on a first date. You're like, people are nasty. Somebody could have their last rib on the plate and they'll say, Otor Patel. But it was finished. But then at the same time, with the twins, Lesedi, and I think when you speak about your friend, some of the things you saw, maybe you thought, this guy is not flexible, that is topic, like on a special interest. Like if he's on about bottles, he's always about bottles. He brings it into every conversation. Lesedi's like that.
It wasn't bottles, but I know what you mean.
But he has a special interest. Like to a point, like, Joe, Katsiba, about plants, but can we stop now, Right. But that's what it is. I think they find patterns. And when you take it from youth to older, you may find some parents also see children lining up items, and I think maybe that's why a lot of autistics are good with mathematics because it's patterns. They line up things. My one was open cupboards. It felt like it was a ghost house. You would walk downstairs and like all the cupboards are open. You're like, why? Why are we open? What's going on? Yeah. And now you take it to an older space where the savants, which everybody loves, oh my Lord, they're geniuses. And I realized something about Rainman. He had one outfit. And that actually makes sense because sometimes you get our children or our autistics having a specific item that they like and that is what they want. You have somebody who cannot deal with strawberries because sometimes they're sour, sometimes they're squishy, sometimes they're like this, whereas crackers are crackers. Crackers are always crackers. And that predictability is what they want. With your friend, you would have found him being very literal in conversation. So humor and sarcasm was really lost. So those are the things you would see when you're dealing with somebody who struggles to transition from task to task, somebody who is rigid in what they want. And I realize also, looking back to Rainman, you can have somebody who can read out the whole encyclopedia for you, but they struggle to brush their teeth. They struggle with the senses of bathing and other things. So, man, even in the movies that we like, that scientist, man, the buttons were just not on right. And that is the difficult part, because even when you can raise somebody who goes through perhaps the proper schooling system, there are these social differences that make life difficult. When you talk about friends, I always have somebody says, oh, I know this lady, she's got an autistic child, they work, whatever. And I remember when I met this lady, she said, they're telling you about the qualifications, they're not telling you about the life. She was saying, I have a daughter who now with social media can speak to a random Dumiso and she believes. And this person will be like, listen, give me your money, give me your things, because you cannot read the dangers. So when you're raising girls, when you're raising kids, our kids are the ones that gangs will use for criminality, because the Sedi wants to belong. I see when I go with him to church and Sunday school and you see the other kids taunt him and they get him to do things because executive functioning is not working the same. So you're not kind of getting that this behavior is inappropriate behavior. And now I'm stuck because I have a child who wants to go to church every week, but I come back with you and you are crying and you've been teasing. I'm like, we're not doing this anymore. So the future is very scary. It's very scary because even where you can see your child being semi-independent, getting into a relationship, having relationships, and even children. There are times that things change. I remember, like I said to you, in infancy, we had certain problems. Then we hit a plateau and we're fine. Now we're hitting puberty. Now it's another nightmare altogether.
Because how old are they now?
My boys they turned 13 in December.
I've got a niece who's in a very similar position. And one of the difficulties, there's a couple of things I still want to know, kind of like, what does the future look like?
Yeah.
Because you've got two. And you've got to think about, I'm sure you want some life of independence for them.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kind of like that looks like. But I was watching, did you see the Louis Theroux BBC special on autism?
No.
Please try to find it somewhere. You know Louis Theroux?
Yes, yeah.
Journalist, gangly, kind of like tall kind of guy. It gave me such an illumination as to the struggles of autistic parents. And he goes to the United States. And the problem with teenagers who become autistic people who are now teenagers becomes physical. Because now they can overpower you.
Yes.
And a lot of their behavior is physical. And I realized my niece doesn't really tell me how physical this gets and how frustrating this is. And that she beats her. She beats her mother.
And because of the spectrum, and listen, from where she is, she's not beating, she's communicating.
Right.
Right? And Mutateng Onalinkana, I mean, Letabo doesn't speak, but Letabo is the most argumentative person in my house. He wants what he wants. And that's why it's a spectrum. You have a parent who's dealing with somebody who has high dependence needs. And somebody where, like, I look at Lesedi and I could see him kind of living life on his own, because luckily at the schools they will do things like skills. Because come into this space and somebody needing things to be regulated and mundane and repetitive, you actually realize those are actually adequate jobs. So now I'm no more embarrassed at the idea. I mean, at first we used to fight to be like, yes, I want my child to go to university. But at some point I had to sit and say, if my child is struggling to do this, and I mean, we meet different autistics. One of the nice things about being an ally and being in the activism space is then you're meeting older people as well, and they're able to help you as a parent now about what worked and what didn't work. And you would find somebody who, on one hand, people are celebrating, Mutoki, went to doctorate, go university, and that person is saying, yeah, but I had somebody helping me. That's not my life. So one of the things I learned with that is we need some of the careers that would be best for autistics are some that don't require you to have too much social interaction. Maybe that's why numbers come up. Maybe that's why the cannabis growing will come up, because you need something that stimulates your senses and you don't have to engage with people. Because remember, people, and I'll go back to your friend, when you guys are many Liwelwans, you can have time with him and it's great. But when there's other people, you find him withdrawing, because it's a sensory stimulation where people are overlapping. And it's not as simple as motor autistic, they don't like noise. No, there are different elements. Sometimes they don't like noise. Sometimes they're struggling with the overlapping conversations. Sometimes they're struggling with, they will say, we are neurotypical. They'll be like, you guys are not clear on what your communication is. If you're asking a question, why don't you want an answer? Whereas we will be saying, oh, really? And somebody's like, okay, but if you're saying, oh, really, is that not a question? Are you a candidate or not?
Well, this particular friend has got a generally quite very sharp sense of humor.
Oh no, totally.
But he will come to a gathering like clockwork. He will sit there for 2.5 hours, half an hour of which he's going to go and sit away from all of you and smoke a blunt. And he brings one Castle Light and one Coca-Cola,
because
and then he
he's
leaves.
Overstimulated by you. And you may find the 2 hours that he does, and even the socializing, and you see it mostly in girls, there's the thing called masking, where they mimic, because especially for people who went undiagnosed for a long time, that's why girls also tend to get diagnosed.
They tend to get later.
Yes, because girls can assimilate and copy behavior. And what happens is then they end up being burnt down by having to pretend and mask and do it. And they will say that, you say, when you get somebody who, you're talking about watching something, you must look up something called The Reason I Jump. And I love it because they're looking at autism in different continents, like in India and UK, and the different approaches that happen. You get eloping people, somebody who just Forrest Gumps and runs, you know, and you don't know what does that, you know, but it's a sensory response.
When we come back, I want us to just kind of touch on a South African cultural context. What do we call autism ngesiZulu? What do we call autism kaSetswana? And most importantly, how do we explain it? Is it one of those things where we say when we come back? Welcome back to Still Uncaptured. Before we went away, we were talking a little bit about language and culture. We started the conversation by saying when we grew up, we don't remember people being autistic. First of all, there was no language for it. It's not to say they did not exist.
Of course they
But
were.
there was nothing written about it, about people on the spectrum and all of that stuff. But what have you found that is culturally relevant? How do Black South African people explain culture? If I was to go to a Sangoma with and being autistic or having an autistic child, what is the cultural significance of what autism is supposed to be?
You know, the journey's been very interesting, especially when you have support groups. There are some spaces where a person used to get a lot of pushback until you get somebody whose own children are diagnosed. Then they sit there and they're like, you know, I remember there was a lady who was saying, Kgomotso, I have been and I would say this, and now it's happening in my world, and I'm not understanding. So there is still no word in a cultural space. What is autism? I remember you would say cultural. I remember doing a awareness raising with court officials, and some guy kept saying, "Oh, this is so autopsy, and I'm like, no, the kids are very much alive. They are very much alive. They just, you know, and that's where you see there is a deficit. So you have to find a way, because you will recall. I mean, worse, I'm a single parent, so and I mean, it's not even just cultural, even in religious. Everybody wants to pray for us. They want to exorcise whatever demon this is. And because they don't present, like I could have my son sometimes looking at his hand and what some of the behavior is that they do, it's a self-regulation. You're doing it now. You're moving your finger. But it's a self-regulation. You're tapping your foot. I break out into song. It's a problem. But with our kids, then they do it bigger and louder. And they do it when they're upset, and they do it also when they show joy. Now, if you have somebody who is not speaking, that is a problem. But I did find that, I think we're getting better as Black South Africa, but perhaps we're getting better as Black urban South Africa.
Right.
Because we had that beautiful thing called COVID happening. And before then, myself, a couple of friends were like, yo, I can't do anything for my child. I'm such a failure of a parent. Because somebody to be sort of like, no, my child is swimming. He is equestrian. He is whatever. And you think, COVID, they had to take all your children. Nannies run away.
The great equalizer.
Your child, it equalized. But one of the things it did, we opened up WhatsApp groups and started conversing.
Right.
I mean, one of the support groups I have, we are Black moms, and we're Black moms across the diaspora. And it's interesting to get the Black experience of a mother sitting in Canada, in South Africa, and whatever, but also how autism in its own history, even in the Western world, used to be seen as is it a cold egg syndrome? Where it's so funny, a lot of the questions are still that. Were you happy to be pregnant? Were you a happy pregnant person? So you sit there where the problem is me. Whereas it is not. And you know, one of the things, there's still no clarity as to how autism happens. Is it genes, whatever? But a lot of the research still points to environmental factors, which makes sense. Because between the climate change, between our GMO food, between our LCD screens, something is happening. Something is happening, because sometimes you have a mother who has all kids who are autistic. Then it's a middle child. Then it's a first child.
That's the other crazy
Then it's
thing.
the parent. I mean, the favorite one where, especially where relationships have fallen apart, is where you look at somebody, you're like, Mr. Man.
Something wrong with you.
When we think of
look at this thing. Yet, as women, you carry so much of the blame for why your child is like that.
So here's just to complete that thought, that train of thought that Kgomotso had started about culture and whatnot, right? So I remember having this conversation with our former colleague, David O'Sullivan, who has talked about the fact that he's also raising a child who's autistic,
Jackie,
right? David and Jackie, one of their sons. And I remember saying to him, David, because he was also asking me about how is it received in the township or in the villages, and I said, I actually would not know because there's no language. But then it got me thinking, and this is a question I'm posing to you, because he says to me, sometimes he will be, as a reporter, he'll be out in the field and he sees some old guy who is tattered. And
you can spot it.
And he's just very... But look, but a lot of people that are called amahlanya, are people who do a lot of repetitive things.
Right.
How much of that do you, as you drive around, you go, this person is probably not mentally disturbed? They just have
It definitely happens. I mean, I spot autism has become a part of my everyday life. Like you spot it so quickly. You're at a store, you see a mother struggling with a child. But I want to go to the township thing and what I was saying to you about COVID. And I loved how we took advantage of the crisis and it was an opportunity for parents to come together, because you do not know the level of relief that comes talking to a parent who is like you.
Right.
A parent who knows, like me, how you can have 3 or 4 nights of no sleep and still have to be functional in the world. A group of parents who know that, oh my Lord, my child went to the loo and they went to the loo in the loo. Like that kind of joy brings the next level. And I think what has excited me when you talk about election, ironically, last week there's now an organization of fathers, of Black fathers, and I'm excited about them because everybody needs to come into this space. They actually had a bicycle run in Vosloorus this weekend, and I'm loving that. I'm loving seeing the structures come together.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because one of the questions that I actually had for you was whether the twins had any effect on your relationship.
Well, I broke up with their father long before the autism. There were other dynamics there.
Yeah.
But I could actually say with him, without being offensive, I think he's only wrapping his mind around it now. Because a lot of time people will be like, no, it's not like that. But you can imagine, I mean, also in the group you have parents who are together, and it is a huge strain.
That must be like a sense of loneliness that you cannot explain.
It is a grief, and it is a grief because, unfortunately, to many people, grief is putting somebody in the ground. But there can be grief on, I imagined life going like this, and now it is going like this. And just because you're grieving doesn't mean you're not accepting.
Right.
My boys are 13. This should have been the year they were in high school and they were in boys' high. So you can imagine every beginning of the year when the people you were pregnant with, their children are transitioning into others. That is a grief like you can't explain it. But we have made adjustments. Like I was talking to you about restaurants. So we call ahead, we order, and then we can do it. We go. I said to you, Lucetti special interest is dates. So he's big on birthdays. And it cannot be a birthday without you being to Spur and then having them sing. But Letabo cares not for this Gumba Gumba thing of theirs. So what do? Nice. You walk up to them, you tell them. Then they come and they sing without the beat. Then Lucetti has got what he wanted. Letabo was just eating away, looking at them going, okay. And he literally looks at them like, as long as you don't switch that thing on, like, I'm okay. And you learn those things because as your kids get older, you have, and this is what I said with parents. I think initially I used to be very, sorry, support. Now I have parents I've met, your cousin, I met people in their houses to be like, listen, this cannot be a pity party, Nana. We don't have time. Your child needs you to get to a level of adjustment and acceptance so that, because they go with our energies, so that you can do the necessary things for your child. You can't be sitting being lonely and feeling miserable. Nobody else understands. You have a child who struggles to communicate. You are the communicator.
So as we wrap this up, right? Are you open to people contacting? There's someone who's watching.
Where can people reach out?
There is so much.
Where do they reach out? And also, more importantly, who also should be reaching out to you? Because there might be someone who's sitting there and they've got a tick box now. They're going, oh, my child. Oh, I think. Right? So to people that want to check, people in relationships with people that are who
Okay,
contact
so
you?
the fathers, I'm still very excited about them. I always talk about them.
Yeah.
It's WWFCN, Fathers of Children with Neurodiversity. They have support groups. They engage with each other. There's Autism South Africa, right? And they've been here the longest, and I think they also have relationships with government, etc., etc. I'll tell you about me. I'll show you this little logo. You'll see it's a fingerprint and a brain because every autistic is different. So if you contact me on Autism Allyship on every social media platform, I'm always very happy to engage with parents, link you up with support groups close to you. But another thing I will say to parents, as you engage and you start looking up autism and you look at the signs, take that to your doctor or to your occupational, because one thing we didn't touch on is sometimes in the sector, just because somebody's a specialist doesn't mean they know it. I've got to a point where I learned every specialist who deals with my child, I need to know their understanding of autism, or else we're wasting each other's time.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, to do policy, I think the biggest thing is we're doing a lot in this advocacy space, but we need to record. There are special schools. Get involved. Bring your voices. It's a different type of parenting, but it is still very enjoyable. I mean, we have adventures for days. And the good days do come along. As long as you make the adjustments and you understand, and your child will know when you understand them better. I'm
glad to have gone through this entire episode without making one stupid toothpick joke.
That was Kgomotso Moalusi. Thank you so much for stopping in, and thanks you at home. Don't forget to engage with us on all our social media platforms. Until next time.